So my sixth question is, what do you find most difficult to remediate, receptive or expressive language deficits? So expressive language would be being able to communicate and express the meaning of language. Receptive language would be individuals' ability to understand and process the language, so someone communicating with them.
Well, I feel like they're really both important because one ties into the other. Being able to decipher what somebody's trying to say and then be able to use it in written form are two key components that are very similar. I mean, opposite ends, but they tie in together. So I think they're equally important.
I would also agree. My seventh question is, what types of issues can arise if a child has a language delay?
Well, being able to express what they need or what they want, or being able to interpret questions from teachers is very difficult for those students because they aren't sure actually what you're asking, which then in turn makes it very difficult for them to answer the questions. And sometimes when they don't understand, emotional issues come into play. It's very frustrating for them.
And that is what I've seen in my school placement, so I 100% agree with that. What are one or two ideas for, hang on, scratch that. Will you provide 1 to 2 ideas for intervention for a language delay? Like, what would you do to help a student who has a language delay?
Well, let's say we're getting ready to sound out words for vocab, and then being able to use those words in a content area. It's what I do is I break the word down in parts.
Mm-hmm.
I frame the word, we say it. A lot of times we say it, see it, say it, spell it. But a lot of times we'll break it down and stretch the word out and put it back together and repeat it. And then I'll use it in a sentence so they can understand what that word really means.
So then going off that question, what are 1 to 2 ideas for an intervention for a behavioral issue that is a result of a communication issue? So the one that we were talking about that they go hand in hand together.
So one of my students who is autistic has a behavior issue, and he has cards that he can refer to when he has choices of behavior, and when he gets frustrated, we like him to place himself in not a timeout situation, but away from the room in the think chair so he can think about the choices that he's made. And then he has an alternative flip chart of things that he could do better. So once he's calmed down, after he's been in the timeout chair, or not timeout chair, but after he's been in the thinking chair for a certain amount of time, then he's able to understand and communicate with me why he was frustrated, and then we choose an alternative measure for the next time.
Okay, so my next question is, how important is nonverbal communication in the educational environment between students and students? Let's start with that. So how important is nonverbal communication in the educational environment between students and students?
Well, nonverbals are huge. It could be anything from somebody giving you an odd look to, hand gestures or body language, and maybe what a message somebody's trying to convey could be interfered with the way how they're acting.
Mm-hmm. So now what about students and staff in the same educational environment?
Well, nonverbals are huge because you could relay something to a student that's totally not your message just by your body language. So it's super important that you are careful about how you relate to students.
And then how about the staff and administration, like those people communicating together? So like obviously like the principal with like a superintendent or just other administrative people.
Communication as a whole is the key to everything. It's huge and it's important. I have to communicate to my students. The principal needs to communicate to myself and the staff. And then the superintendent is above everybody else. In my case, it's the Toledo Diocese, and then our principal, and then the staff.
Mm-hmm. So now what about nonverbal communication between the staff and administration?
Nonverbals as far as?
Just like the different, like you said before, like the looks that they give one another, their body language. Just like all those nonverbal cues that could signal something
Well,
else.
sometimes the cues that you get from a principal or a superintendent, well, as far as a principal, um, it could be cues for anything like, listening to a student as they're talking, or maybe a student is upset about something and they write something down and they didn't really mean what they wrote down. Instance, I had a student do that. So those nonverbals, she wrote things down, but in her interpretation, that's not what she meant. So you have to be very careful. There's so many emotional issues that might hinder the way people act and perceive others.
Mm-hmm. So then going off of that, how important is nonverbal communication in the educational environment with like a staff and a family member? So like you communicating to a parent.
I feel like nonverbals are huge because the way you act toward a parent or a coworker says a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're on their side, joining in, you disagree, it plays a huge role in the way you act and the way you collaborate with each other.
I would think so. Just brainstorming that off the top of my head. And then my last question is, provide a scenario from your teaching career where there was a communication breakdown among the staff which affected the rapport or morale.
So I actually am dealing with that currently with an IEP that I have. One of the accommodations that's in the IEP is not acceptable to one of our teachers. However, I am getting the support of the other teachers that are involved, that they know me, they know my work ethic, they know my personality with students. So they trust me on the accommodations that are given each student. And this particular teacher is not very happy about it. So her nonverbals are very clear. And the other staff members are showing super support for me, along with the principal.
What are some of her nonverbals?
Rolling of the eyes, just her facial expressions, body language.
Oh, goodness. That does not sound okay at all.
It's okay. It's okay because she's just frustrated because she doesn't understand. So that's my job, to make her understand, why things are accommodated the way they are. It's all good.
No, that is just awesome. Thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate it.
You are most welcome.